Thank you, Mr. Jack. Mr. Norman, you're recognized.
Jody, thank you for your job that you did on the Budget Committee. To get unanimous support as we did, as quick as we did, is admirable, and it's due to your leadership.
I had a lot of good help from some Budget Committee members that I'm looking at right now.
You know, I've heard these same arguments that's been bellowed out here tonight about really Granny going off the cliff, even though Social Security is not cut at all. We're not considering that. Medicaid cuts. Is work requirement of able-bodied men is that a cut?
No, sir.
Is block grants and letting states decide how they want to administer it a cut?
No, sir.
Is the fact of $500 billion in fraud, improper payments by the GAO, that's not a political group, is that a cut?
And that's just on Medicaid program for the 10 years. No, sir, that's not a cut.
And
It's a cut for the fraudsters, but not for the beneficiaries.
correct. Is it not true that Medicaid increased 51% from 2019 to 2023 in cost due to illegals taking advantage of the system? Basically a carte blanche admission of anybody and everybody that want to sign up.
I believe it was from dismissing and enforcing any eligibility for receiving Medicaid benefits. And so those were people that were not eligible, some were illegal, some were in this country. But the fact is, people not eligible that would put a strain on the finite resources of Medicaid for the most vulnerable happened as a result of the Biden administration unilaterally dismissing eligibility, and that's put tremendous strain, and it's put a 60% increase in the cost of that program. By the way, the 10 million people that were added during COVID are still on that program today. That number still exists today, even though we're not in that COVID response anymore.
And the baseline cuts of $1.5 trillion up to $2 trillion. The percentage of our total budgeted amount is, what'd you say, 1.25% cuts as a percentage of what we spend?
That sounds about right. I would just say $7 trillion is the annual budget, and you just multiply that by 10 effectively. But even in mandatory spending, it's just the 1/3 outside of Medicare and Social Security. That's $18 trillion without interest cost, $18 trillion over 10 years. We're talking about one.
You bring up a good point. Interest cost isn't included in this.
That's correct.
And isn't our interest cost alone on the debt that we now have is surpassed our military?
It's surpassed our military and what we spend to support our seniors on their health care safety net of Medicare. And it is now 50 cents on every dollar. And in 10 years, it will be 62 cents of every dollar.
Getting back to the percentage that we're asking the committees to come up with, would anybody watching this, or any family, or any of the 34,000 businesses, if you asked them to find a readjustment of expenditures, leaving intact 98%, cutting 1.5%, would they laugh you out of the?
They would laugh until they realized it was true that there were some colleagues of ours who couldn't even commit to that, with some admission that this government of the people is wholly inefficient, very much fraught with fraud and waste, and then they would lose hope. They would lose hope that we'd be able to pull up and out of what is a debt-to-interest spiral and what could be economic death and America's leadership in the world as we know it, without a single shot being fired from an existential adversarial threat.
The debt we were accumulating is the main driver of a downgrading of our American bonds, downgrading of the bodies willing to buy them, and so that was at risk. That really was underpinning of our entire country. And I keep hearing Elon Musk, billionaire here, and other rich people. Did Elon Musk make his money off government?
He's a CEO of a private company.
So he made a product, didn't he?
He did.
He made a product did he make people buy his product?
No, nobody forced them to buy the
And
product.
did he make the rockets that he himself invented?
That's correct.
Didn't make anybody do anything?
That's correct.
I find this interesting that the Democrats had 4 years under Biden to advocate for any type cuts. Do you remember this administration advocating for any cuts or any modifications on anything other than expansion of government?
No, sir, only to cut the tax cuts that we put in TCJA as they expire this year.
In other words, we've got a basic different worldview. They think the tax money is theirs. They think it's not the people's. That's not, the tax cuts are one that they deserve to have by any means, and there's no reason in the world that they are wanting to question anything. All they want to do is denigrate what your committee has done. All they want to do is say what they did over 4 years under Biden, which was inflation, a rampant border out of control. Where's the empathy for Lake and Riley? Where's that? Where's the empathy for the apartment complex that was taken over by gangs? Where's the empathy for those who are sapping this country dry? It's not there. And it's really an insult to every American. And the verdict was rendered on November 5th with 77 million people voting the way they did for Donald Trump. And yes, Elon Musk with what he's doing. So I applaud your work. And Chip, I'd like to
But gentlemen, yield just for
yield
just 1 minute.
you for.
I just want to insert an article in the record from the Economic Policy and Innovation Center that outlines the extent to which the spending went up significantly under the Biden-Harris regime. It increased by federal deficit by $2.5 trillion, more than what the CBO projected. Spending surged by $4.7 trillion. The national debt rose to $35.5 trillion by the end of the administration. Americans faced the highest rates of inflation in 4 decades, and this is the important part, reducing the average worker's purchasing power by about $2,230. And I would just suggest credit to the chairman about trying to take on the inflation tax, which is the biggest tax on our average American family that needs to be cut. And the only way to deal with that is to constrain federal spending. And I would also note that if you confiscated every dollar of Mr. Musk's wealth, every single dollar, you do what? Pay for about 1/3 of our interest, just our interest this year, and then you leave it with zero. I yield back to the gentleman from South Carolina.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Roy. Thank you for your work. It's a new day in this country. People are excited. People are sick and tired of what the rhetoric that you have heard from the right. And really, it's about to come to a head with the actual numbers that are coming out of waste, fraud, and abuse that their side will not touch because they think it's their money. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Without objection, we'll insert the article that Mr. Roy mentioned, and thank you very much, Mr. Norman. And thanks to our witnesses for being here.